And you said you've also, and I've actually heard a number of your speeches where you really talk that there's a war for talent, particularly within the Air Force, within the military, but I think actually, as you said, with all U.S. businesses. Can you talk a little bit about how, under your leadership, you tried to combat that challenge?
Absolutely. So when I was Secretary of the Air Force, we were essentially at the tail end of what had been a historic downsizing in the military. And when I came on board, after about 6 months or so, and particularly from traveling around the Air Force, even though the numbers supposedly added up in Washington, that the numbers that we had were adequate to do the mission, the travel and seeing the units and listening to the people convinced me that we were too short. And so we then began to build up in certain key areas like cyber and space, important for the future, and just your nuts and bolts of maintenance. We were short on maintenance and pilots as well. So those were some of the initial efforts: recruiting more people, getting them in the front door, doing a better job on retaining your top talent, the top specialties that you want to retain. And then I've always been a big believer in diversity inclusion. I was in business, I certainly have always been in government. And so what that means to me is it means opening your aperture when it comes to recruiting new people into your either Air Force or into your business. All different types of people have the mental capability, the physical capability. They need to have the ethical responsibility if they're going to be in business or in the military. So if they can cut the mustard, they ought to have an opportunity to have a shot. So opening up the aperture to different types of people, women, minorities. I'm in favor of opening the service to transgender individuals. If they can do the job, all of these categories of people should have a shot. So diversity and inclusion was always a key piece of the program for me, both in business as well as Secretary of the Air Force.
And rewarding performance.
Rewards are important too.
Yeah. There was, I think, when you first got in, within the first few months, there was an issue with your, is it the nuclear weapon team?
Yes.
And you handled that head on by developing a grassroots program. Can you tell a little bit about that? I think it was called the Force Improvement Program.
Yes, well, it was approximately 3 weeks into my tenure as Secretary of the Air Force when it came to my attention that there was cheating going on a proficiency test at one of the major land-based nuclear bases out west. So these are the ICBMs, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Forces. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, if the young people who are charged with this awesome responsibility of standing watch over these nuclear weapons are cheating on their exams, does that mean they don't know their jobs? Does that mean that our nuclear enterprise is not safe and secure? To me, that was a really big deal. So what we did was, number one, we went public with the information in pretty short order because we thought that was the best thing to do. You tell people what you know and what you don't know and what you're going to do to find out. And then I launched to try to figure out what we ought to do, and part of that investigation was going out to the bases and talking to some of these young people. I did focus groups without leaders in the room, and I talked to the leaders as well, and quickly began to believe, but to be ascertained more fully later on, that this was first and foremost a personnel-related problem, that the wrong incentives were in place that had caused these young people to cheat. And the incentive which was in place, believe it or not, was they were promoting people based on those who could obtain 100% test scores on these exams.
Interesting.
Now, getting a 90 was considered to be proficient, and that was a passing grade. But nobody wanted to just be passing. Everybody had to get 100, because if they didn't get 100, they would not be promoted. So that was the incentive. So these young people, the terrible irony is they cheated to get promoted. They didn't cheat to pass. And so that opened up the world of we needed to make some personnel training related changes. It also came to my attention at that point that the nuclear enterprise had not been funded appropriately, that the equipment was getting old. And so, long story short, a lot of the personnel related things, a lot of the training related things came out of focus groups, which we ultimately called the Force Improvement Program. And quite simply, it was going from base to base and talking to the real people on the scene who knew exactly what was what, and listening to their suggestions and then implementing a good many of them.
So that right there is a playbook in how to do crisis management that you can apply both in the military and at the corporate level, right? To find that on the job 3 weeks in. How did you address the war for talent when you were at SAIC, running the technical and engineering division?
Well, of course, as a president of a sector at SAIC, I was thankful that I had a great team that helped with that. I had an HR team and recruiters. And as far as I can recall, we used every trick in the book, everything from social media to campus recruiting. I've been a big believer in let's go and do more campus recruiting, but let's try to get interns in the front door who are do a summer or two with us, and hopefully if they're happy and we're happy, that could be our next new employee. And so we tried to ramp up the intern program during that period as well. We also made a big effort to close, or I should say reduce, the number of days it took from making a hiring offer to actually getting the person on board, because we found that the longer it took, people who were in hot demand and who had perhaps multiple offers simply did not want to wait for us. So we realized that we needed to get on the ball and do a better job of, cutting our own bureaucracy and trying to get people in our front door quicker. So there were a number of tools, including diversity and inclusion. So we worked on that as well, opening the aperture and trying to bring in different people from different backgrounds.
So those are great tactical approaches to building the workforce and maintaining, because recruiting and retention are key elements of having a strong workforce. How did that actually plug into your corporate strategy?
So in addition to the tactical approaches, our overall strategy, I will say, was we wanted to get into more interesting high-end work, and particularly into more solution-oriented work when I was at SAIC. And so talent management from a strategic perspective had us looking 5 years into the future, which meant that we needed more science, technology, engineering, and math, otherwise known as STEM types of employees, who could help us build some of those solutions that we could then hopefully attract our customers with. And so we also took that strategic approach. We invested more in independent research and development. We found that our employees, the technical employees, really enjoyed having some of their time to be able to be devoted to IRAD projects. It allowed them to work on challenging problems that they might not get on their direct work. So that was another technique that we used that was, I think, beneficial to people and helped us to attract and retain.
Since leaving the Air Force, as Secretary of the Air Force, you now have actually put together a really strong portfolio of board appointments, public company, and a couple of private company board assignments. Where is the board of directors' role in addressing this war for talent? Where do you have that conversation in the boardroom about talent and about making sure that your workforce provides that competitive edge that you're looking for?
Every board meeting that I have been to in this, my first year of serving on boards, we talk about talent in one way, shape, or form. So, for example, a key role of the board is the strategy of the company. And I can't imagine any company worth its salt in the United States today, when they're talking about strategy, that they don't talk about talent management as a part of that strategy. And how to, for example, manage, or the challenges of managing and leading a workforce that includes everybody from the baby boomers who are older and perhaps going to be retiring soon, to the youngest of the generation Xers or Zs. I think we may be to the generation Zs now, or maybe I just made that up, I'm not sure. And everybody in between. But it's those sorts of challenges. There's the challenges to the extent that you're involved with technical work, as many companies are, and innovations. You're going to be looking for science, technology, engineering, and math skills. Not exclusively, but heavily, those skills are needed. And we as a country are not producing enough of those skills coming out of technical schools and coming out of university, and we need to do something differently in this country to address this. So we get into it during the strategy meetings of the board. Obviously, another role of the board is to select the CEO, to do the performance review of the CEO of the company, and some boards go one level down and they get involved with the executive team as well. So that's another form of talent. I would say a third component is ethics, which goes throughout all of talent discussions. You've got to have the right tone at the top. That means the CEO, yes, but it means the board of directors as well. And so, for example, in the boardroom these days, and certainly in my boards, we have been talking about sexual harassment, sexual assault. What exactly are our policies? Let's go over this again. Board members are asking and wanting to make sure that the CEO, or again, the people at the top, are setting the right tone so that employees know that if there are problems, they can come forward, that there will not be retribution, and that if there are problems, we want to fix them. And by the way, we expect dignity and respect, and we don't want these problems.
One last question about talent and taking care of talent is the veterans. Because they're retiring from the military younger, right? And so there's a lot, and I know that you've done a lot of work with helping with the transitions, and not just with the veterans, but with their entire families, but the transitions into the civilian workplace. As a non-military, as a civilian population, what else can we be doing for the veterans as they transition into the workforce?
Well, as veterans, as military personnel transition to civilian life and become veterans, I think there's room for improvement in our government programs. We have programs both in the Department of Defense that tries to get them ready. There's VA programs that can help them once they're out through the Veterans Administration. But there's plenty of room for improvement, and a lot of the feedback that I was receiving when I was in the government was these programs were inadequate in a variety of ways. So improvement there. I think we all should feel blessed that American corporations are stepping up to the plate. Many have made commitments to hire large numbers of veterans over the next 5 to 10 years. That's excellent, but it doesn't address some veterans who are harder to employ. Naturally, the corporations are looking for the types of skills that directly fit their business. You can understand that. But there are others that perhaps don't have those skills, and what do we do with them? So feel blessed about what American companies are doing, but once again, there's room for improvement there, and we hope that other companies will come in and join. And then the third aspect is there are nonprofits nowadays and not-for-profits that have stepped in and are running job programs and various skill-based things and helping with certifications. So there are a lot of resources out there. I think there's room for more of all of that, and there is also room for improvement. And I think the key improvement needs to be targeted not at the STEM-related skills or the veterans who are coming out with an extremely marketable knowledge or a marketable trade. It needs to be focused on those who are more on the unskilled category, because those are the hardest people to employ.